U.S. President Joe Biden is sitting down with Chinese President Xi Jinping in San Francisco right now. It comes as the Asia-Pacific Economic Cooperation Summit gets underway, and the two leaders' first in-person meeting in more than a year comes at a time of global conflict and strained relations between the two countries. Here's a look at what they had to say when they first got together.
There is no substitute to face-to-face discussions. I've always found our discussions straightforward and frank, and I've always appreciated them. Mr. President, we know each other for a long time. We haven't always agreed, which was not a surprise to anyone, but our meetings have always been candid, straightforward, and useful. I've never doubted what you've told me in terms of your candid nature in which you speak. I value our conversation because I think it's paramount that you and I understand each other clearly, leader to leader, with no misconceptions or miscommunication. We have to ensure that competition does not veer into conflict.
Let's dig into this story a little bit more, and we've reached Elbridge Colby. He's a former U.S. Deputy Assistant Secretary of Defense for Strategy and Force Development, and reached him in Washington. Welcome to the program. Appreciate your time.
Thanks, Hannah.
When you see these two powerhouses, two world leaders sitting down finally after really big tensions, and those tensions really grew in the past year, in particular with that Chinese spy balloon, is this, starting to break those tensions?
No, to put it bluntly.
Okay.
In fact, the administration itself is signaling very, very low expectations for the summit. And I mean, look, I'm all in favor of jaw is better than war, as Winston Churchill said. But of course, the deterioration in relations followed the summit in Bali. But of course, this deterioration has been going on for several years. It's worth bearing in mind that President Biden met with President Putin in June of 2021, just 8 months before the invasion of Ukraine. So I think at best, what the administration is trying to achieve is a direct line to Xi Jinping, who seems to be pretty clearly the key decision maker in the Chinese system. But I think expectations are quite low. The Chinese are obviously in a period where the economic challenges are pretty significant. And I think they're looking to try to speak to American business elites. There's a dinner that's going on, I believe later tonight, where Xi Jinping is going to address a range of top American business leaders. But I think nothing has changed in China's fundamental view. The Wall Street Journal put it in a recent article that Xi Jinping regards the United States as an existential threat to the People's Republic. So that reality is going to continue, unfortunately.
Does Xi not need, the Americans, though? You look at the fact that it's kind of soured now that he has really aligned himself with Vladimir Putin. Also, you talk about the economic troubles that China is now having. Does he kind of need the U.S. a little bit?
Well, the need sort of goes in both directions. In fact, some of the reporting that's sourced to senior administration officials was saying that President Biden is going to ask Xi Jinping's help with restraining Iran and the Middle East conflict. I believe a Hamas delegation was in Beijing or is heading to Beijing shortly. And more broadly, that to try to avoid a crisis or confrontation because the administration is focused on Ukraine, the Middle East, and the president's impending apparent re-election campaign. So it's true that the Chinese economy is weak, and that's probably one of the tactical reasons why Xi Jinping is here, is to try to avoid some of the economic containment or sanction measures that China doesn't want. But I think fundamentally the relationship will remain at best on a sort of confrontational trajectory and possibly conflictual, God forbid.
Yeah, is it important that the U.S. mends the relationship a little bit? Because right now, you even see Canada. Canada is starting to look to other suppliers when it comes to goods, services, those types of things. And it appears that the Americans are doing the same type of thing as well.
Look, I don't think this relationship is going to be mended. We're not going to go back. I think there's an element of that has a significant influence in American thinking, particularly in business elites, some parts of the Democratic Party. But there's no going back, and I don't think the Chinese are open to it. In fact, the U.S. China Commission, a special congressionally chartered commission, just reported the Chinese are taking a wave of steps to insulate their economy from potential Western sanctions and to decouple. Some people talk about how we shouldn't decouple, and I think there's good arguments on. What's pretty clear is that China is trying to decouple and also trying to increase its leverage over not only the American but other Western, such as Canadian economies. So I think, my own view is that we need to operate with China from a position of strength. I do think some of the rhetoric in the United States is is overheated. So I think the basic sort of aspiration of the Biden administration approach, which is to get into a situation with China where there could be competition without confrontation, without conflict, is the right one. But the way they're going about it is not. I think at best it's ignoring the problem. And at worst, I think there is a concern that Xi Jinping is going to see President Biden. He's been sinking in the polls here in the United States. There are a lot of reports that, to put it generously, he's not as sharp as he might once have been. And, you have to wonder, why did President Putin decide to go into Ukraine? Why did Premier Khrushchev decide to push in Berlin and Cuba in 1961? One of the reasons was because he met John F. Kennedy at the Vienna summit and decided this was an opportune moment after dealing with Dwight Eisenhower. So I think there are risks involved. So the goal of stability and détente I share, but the way we're going about it, I think, is imprudent at best.
Yeah, that's a fascinating way to look at it. I hadn't really thought about that. So I guess one of the things in sitting down and trying to at least be able to have a conversation, because I'm sure you know as well, our prime minister currently, the ties are so bad with China that they don't even, it doesn't appear that they even try to set a meeting with them. I don't know if you can comment on that, but is that detrimental to a country like Canada?
Well, very. Look, the way I think about it and what I say to Europeans, for instance, is if the United States is worried about China, countries like Canada should be absolutely terrified. And nobody made a stronger effort to reach out to Canada than Prime Minister Trudeau. And you can see the dismissive, haughty way that Chairman Xi treated the Prime Minister in Bali, for instance. That is a foretaste. That is something that Asian countries, Southeast Asian countries, are very familiar with. And that's one of the reasons why China has become quite a bit less popular in the region. But the fact is that China is very, very, very powerful. They are facing economic headwinds, but their military buildup has not stopped. They are by far the world's largest industrial power. So we need to approach China from a position of strength. And again, if that's true for America, it's an order of magnitude more true for Canada.
Elbridge Colby, really enjoyed this discussion. Thank you for coming on the program.
Thanks, Anna. Pleasure.